Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Kicking off our dive today, let's look at the editorial section. First up, there's this piece from Foreign Affairs called India's Great Power Delusions. It certainly stirred things up. The article suggests India might be, well, overestimating its place in the world, especially when you look at China and the U.S. But is that really fair? Does it get India's position right? Okay, let's unpack this.
It's an interesting piece, but it arguably misses something fundamental about India, this deep, almost historical belief in its own future trajectory. It sort of frames an India-China conflict as, almost bound to happen, and that India would inevitably need the U.S. to step in.
Right.
But that overlooks the fact that both India and China see themselves as civilizational powers. Their influence goes way back, rooted in ancient history and culture. And honestly, neither side seems to be rushing towards a full-blown war, even with the border tensions. In fact, if you look at recent diplomatic moves, like those meetings in Tianjin, you could argue India, China, and Russia are actually forming a pretty strong phalanx against certain kinds of disruption in Asia.
So the idea of an inevitable clash is maybe too simplistic.
I think so. It misses that wider strategic picture.
That's a really important point. And critics, they often don't quite get India's unique development path, do they? India never really set out to just, copy China or catch up to the U.S. in the same way. Its journey, transforming from a nation struggling with famine to a major food exporter through the Green Revolution. Prioritizing, as they said, butter before guns. That's quite a story.
It really is remarkable.
And historically, India carried significant sort of moral weight. It championed non-alignment after World War II, even played the role of arbiter in conflicts like the Korean War.
And that leads us to these persistent misunderstandings, especially from the West. Think back to the 1970s, when the U.S. and China had their, bromance. India's significance was often downplayed then.
Right, I remember that period.
And even today, you see Western policymakers sometimes struggling to grasp India's ability to manage contradictions.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, like maintaining strong defense and energy ties with Russia, even with U.S. pressure and sanctions.
Right.
Or fostering engagement with China through platforms like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, despite the ongoing border disputes. From India's perspective, these aren't really contradictions. They're just different aspects of pursuing a genuinely independent foreign policy.
That makes sense. And the article does touch on something else, that global power isn't just about armies and economies anymore. It's increasingly about empires of the mind, about technological leadership. It even suggests the U.S. lead in critical tech might be ephemeral, pointing out that many of the top tech minds, the Sherpas in Silicon Valley, are actually of Indian and Asian origin.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important for the West, maybe, to develop a more nuanced view of India, understanding its inherent strengths, its, leap of faith towards future technologies. That's crucial. Just relying on these old, maybe hackneyed themes or narratives, it just doesn't really capture the reality of the evolving global landscape. India's civilizational depth, combined with its tech aspirations, that's key to understanding the new dynamics.
A much more complex picture than the article initially suggests. Okay, let's stay in the editorial section, but shift gears completely. We're looking now at India's online gaming scene. There's been a really significant move by the government, almost like a stealth operation. They passed the Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Bill 2025.
Yeah.
And this basically outlaws online real money games. What's striking is that it happened without much or any prior debate or consultation.
Yes, it was quite abrupt.
The huge shift for what everyone was calling a sunrise sector.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the fallout is already significant. This ban is creating, substantial ripples. You had this thriving industry, and now it's facing potentially massive job losses. The estimate mentioned is around 1.5 lakh. That's 150,000 jobs potentially gone by 2025.
Wow.
These are jobs across tech, support, marketing, a whole ecosystem.
And beyond jobs.
It sends a real chilling signal for foreign direct investment, not just in gaming, but maybe in the broader digital space. International investors might start questioning the stability and predictability of India's regulatory environment.
That's a serious concern.
And then there's the money. The government itself, both union and states, could lose out on an estimated 17,000 crore, roughly $2 billion in GST revenue. That's not insignificant.
So the government's rationale is about protecting people, right? Preventing financial ruin, addiction. Those are the stated reasons. But the big question is, does just banning it outright, does prohibition actually cure those problems?
Right.
Or could there have been a more, balanced approach, like careful regulation, maybe similar to what some states like Tamil Nadu or
Well, that's the core debate. And arguably, the ban could be counterproductive. The established industry, they had already put in place various responsible play tools, things like age verification, setting deposit limits, KYC checks.
Right, those safeguards were there.
Exactly. This ban effectively dismantles all of that. So what happens to compulsive players? They might just get pushed towards unregulated, illegal offshore apps.
Ah, so driving it underground.
Precisely. And on those platforms, there are no Indian regulations, they pay no taxes here, and consumers are actually more vulnerable to fraud and unsafe practices. The government loses all accountability and revenue.
Yeah, and are there legal challenges too?
Yes, there are constitutional questions being raised. Does it infringe on the fundamental right to practice a profession? And it bumps up against federalism because gambling and betting are typically state subjects. So a central ban is, well, complex legally.
It really sounds like finding a middle ground might have been better. Perhaps a clear licensing system, strict rules for player protection that companies have to follow, and a fair, predictable tax system. That seems like it could allow the sector to operate responsibly, generate revenue, protect players, rather than just shutting it down.
That's certainly the alternative path many were hoping for. Regulation, not prohibition.
Okay, let's move on to the opinion section now. And this is some genuinely exciting news, actually, about education. We're seeing 12 top foreign universities setting up physical campuses right here in India. One from the UK is already open in Gurugram, apparently, and more are planned for other major cities.
Yes, this is quite a significant development, and it's not happening by chance. It's part of a conscious policy realignment by the University Grants Commission, the UGC, and the Ministry of Education. It directly flows from the National Education Policy 2020, which had this vision for higher education in India to be globally competitive while remaining locally rooted.
Ah, so it's part of a larger plan.
Exactly. And India is a very attractive destination for these universities right now. You have this huge, young, aspirational population, plus a relatively stable economy, and enormous demand for skills in new age fields, think AI, data science, biotech.
So for Indian students, what does this actually mean?
Well, it's potentially transformative. It means access to international standard education without the often prohibitive costs and, the logistical challenges of moving abroad.
That could open doors for so many people who were previously held back by money or family situation.
Absolutely. And think about the other benefits being part of diverse student networks. Access to potentially vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystems connected to these universities, all happening domestically.
It really could change the landscape.
Yeah.
What about the impact on India itself beyond the individual students?
There are dual benefits here. Firstly, it raises the bar for our own domestic universities. Healthy competition usually spurs improvement. Secondly, it should foster much stronger research collaborations. Imagine joint projects between top Indian and global universities tackling big challenges: renewable energy, public health, climate change. India has this incredibly long and rich tradition of scholarship going back centuries. This move could position India to become a real education powerhouse again, drawing global talent and ideas, but engaging on its own terms.
Fascinating. A chance to leverage that history in a very modern way. Okay, still in the opinion section, let's shift to agriculture, specifically the cotton sector. There seems to be a bit of a debate brewing, framed as farms versus firms. This follows the government's decision to remove the 11% import duty on cotton. On one side, you have farmer unions protesting the move. On the other, the textile industry seems relieved, especially as they're facing those punishing U.S. tariffs on garments. Okay, let's unpack this one too.
Yes, the pressures on both sides are quite real and immediate. The textile industry is struggling. Those high U.S. tariffs mean reduced orders, and that directly leads to job losses, particularly affecting women garment workers. So cheaper raw material, like imported cotton without the duty, offers some relief.
Okay, so the firms need cheaper cotton. What about the farms?
Well, farmers are facing a tough situation too. They're seeing declining price parity. Domestic cotton prices have been relatively high compared to falling global prices. So removing the import duty makes imported cotton even cheaper, putting more downward pressure on the prices farmers can get for their crop. Ginning mills face a difficult market too.
It's a tricky balancing act. Now, India's role in the global cotton market has shifted over time, hasn't it?
It certainly has. There was a huge surge in exports, particularly after 2004-05. A lot of that was attributed to the adoption of Batik cotton technology.
Right, the genetically modified cotton.
Yes. And that also helped strengthen the links between farms and the domestic textile industry for a while. But now, things are changing again. Despite previous import duties being in place, raw cotton imports jumped by a huge 77% in the 2024-25 season, apparently. That signals some underlying issues.
So what are those core issues making domestic cotton relatively expensive?
It's a mix of factors. One is declining acreage. Farmers are switching to other crops that might seem more profitable or less risky. Another big one is stagnating productivity. India's cotton yields haven't really kept pace.
Why is that?
A major reason is that the braid technology we rely on is now over 2 decades old. Pests like the pink bollworm are developing resistance, making the technology less effective, especially in rain-fed or dryland areas where a lot of cotton is grown.
How bad is the yield gap?
It's significant. India's average yield is around 437 kilograms per hectare. Compare that to Brazil at over 1,900 kilograms or China at nearly 2,300 kilograms per hectare.
Wow, that's a massive difference.
It really is. And that low productivity is a key driver of higher domestic costs.
So just tweaking tariffs, like removing the import duty, isn't really addressing the root cause, is it?
Probably not, no. It might provide short-term relief for the textile mills, but it doesn't solve the fundamental farm-level problems.
What's needed then?
The argument is for more targeted public research and development in advanced seed technology. Look at Brazil. They have newer versions, like Bollgard III, engineered for better pest resistance. China is using cutting-edge techniques like CRISPR gene editing to improve crops. India needs similar investments in R&D to develop cotton varieties that are high-yielding, high-quality, and suited to our diverse agricultural conditions, especially resisting pests in drylands.
So it's about strengthening that whole chain, from the farm to the factory, focusing on both quantity and quality, not just playing with import duties.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the more sustainable long-term approach.
Okay, let's move into the science section now. This first article tackles a really critical global health issue. Mosquitoes. The US CDC isn't exaggerating when it calls them the world's deadliest animals. We're talking over 1 million deaths every year from the diseases they carry.
It's a staggering number.
And climate change is making it worse, right?
Yeah.
Their habitats are expanding, bringing diseases like malaria, dengue, Zika into new regions, which leads to this huge, almost sci-fi question. Should we actually try to eradicate them? Wipe them out completely? Okay, let's unpack this complex idea.
It's a massive question with huge ecological considerations. There's an argument presented by researchers like Dr. Lisa Cooper that maybe targeting only the specific few species that are vectors for human diseases, maybe that wouldn't cause a major ecological collapse.
Why is that?
Because those particular species might not be, essential pollinators or critical links in the food chain for many other animals. Their removal might not leave a gaping hole.
Interesting. But there must be counter-arguments.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Marcella Jacobs-Lorena makes a crucial point. Using broad-spectrum insecticides is like using antibiotics. You inevitably breed resistance. He points out that the significant decline we saw in malaria deaths actually stalled around 2015, partly because mosquitoes were becoming resistant to the insecticides we were using.
And insecticides have their own problems.
Definitely. We only need to remember the environmental damage caused by DDT in the past to be cautious about widespread chemical use.
So if chemicals are problematic, what about other approaches? I read about some innovative chemical-free strategies, like the sterile insect technique. Can you explain that?
Sure. It's quite clever, actually. You rear huge numbers of male mosquitoes in a lab, and remember, only females bite.
Right.
You then sterilize these males, usually with radiation, and release them into the wild. They mate with wild females, but because the males are sterile, the eggs produced aren't viable. They don't hatch.
So the population crashes naturally.
Exactly. If you release enough sterile males over time, you can significantly suppress or even locally eliminate a target population. It's highly specific to the target species.
That sounds promising. Are there even newer methods?
Yes, science is moving fast here. Researchers are now using precision gene editing tools like CRISPR-Cas9. They can use it to create genetically modified male mosquitoes that are inherently sterile, or even more sophisticated, they can create mosquitoes whose offspring are only male. This is called a gene drive, potentially.
Wow, self-limiting populations. Is this supported?
The World Health Organization, the WHO, actually supports research into these genetic approaches, provided it's done under very clear governance and safety protocols.
Okay.
And then there's a really surprising discovery, a repurposed drug called nitisinone.
Nitisinone, what's that?
It's an FDA-approved drug used for a rare human metabolic disorder. But scientists found that when malaria-carrying mosquitoes ingest blood containing even small amounts of this drug, it kills them.
Even if they're resistant to normal insecticides.
Apparently so. It offers a completely different mechanism of attack. It's a fascinating potential new tool.
But is eradication even feasible or desirable? As I mentioned, of a frying pan or fire argument.
Yes, that comes from mosquito ecologists like Dr. Phil Lunevos. His caution is basically this. If you successfully eradicate one mosquito species, what happens next? Does another, potentially worse, mosquito species move in to fill that ecological niche? Or could the original species simply reinvade from neighboring areas?
So permanent eradication is incredibly difficult.
Immensely difficult. Mosquitoes reproduce so quickly and adapt so readily. Wiping one species off the face of the earth entirely and keeping it gone is a monumental challenge, maybe even impossible on a global scale.
So if not eradication, what's the alternative?
This leads to the idea of mosquito modification rather than elimination, making them harmless instead of killing them.
How would that work?
The leading example is the World Mosquito Program. They've had incredible success using a naturally occurring bacterium called Wolbachia.
Well,
Yes, they introduced this bacterium into Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, the ones that spread dengue, Zika, chikungunya. The key thing is, Wolbachia inside the mosquito somehow prevents these viruses from replicating properly. So the mosquito can bite someone, but it can't transmit the virus.
it breaks the transmission cycle.
Exactly. They release these Wolbachia-infected mosquitoes, they breed with the wild population, and the bacteria spreads. In some parts of Australia where they've done this, local dengue transmission has basically stopped completely. It's a sustainable, self-perpetuating solution.
It was genuinely amazing. Does this work for malaria too? Malaria mosquitoes are different, right? Anopheles?
Right, different genus. But researchers, including some at GlaxoSmithKline working with Dr. Lorena, have found other bacteria that can do something similar in Anopheles mosquitoes. They discovered specific bacteria that, when present in the mosquito's gut, actually block the Plasmodium parasite, the one that causes malaria from developing.
So the mosquito itself is kind of cured of being infectious.
Precisely. It can still bite, but it doesn't pass on the malaria parasite. It's another way to make the mosquito harmless without killing it.
So we have insecticides, sterile insects, gene editing, repurposed drugs, bacteria. It's a lot of tools.
It is. And Dr. Lorena's perspective here is really important. He emphasizes nothing is 100%. None of these new tools, genetic modification, Wolbachia, nitisinone, are likely to be a single magic bullet that solves everything on its own.
Right, no silver bullet.
No, they are incredibly valuable additions to our toolkit. But the real path forward is likely a multi-pronged strategy. We need to combine all the effective approaches we have. Continuing to treat infected people, using insecticides where they still work and are safe, controlling breeding sites, rolling out vaccines as they become available, and deploying these newer modification or suppression techniques strategically.
An integrated approach.
Exactly. It's about using everything we've got, layering interventions to really push back against these devastating diseases.
The complex problem needs a complex solution. Makes sense. Okay, sticking with science, but shifting to wildlife conservation. There's news from Australia about koalas. They've approved the world's first vaccine to protect koalas from chlamydia. That sounds like a big step for the species. Okay, let's unpack this.
It is potentially a very significant breakthrough, yes. Chlamydia is devastating for koala populations. It causes severe urinary tract infections, blindness, infertility. In some areas, infection rates can be as high as 70%. It's a major factor pushing local populations towards extinction.
And why is a vaccine particularly important here? Can't they just use antibiotics?
That's the problem. Antibiotics can treat chlamydia, but they also wreak havoc on the koala's gut microbiome. Koalas have highly specialized gut bacteria to digest eucalyptus leaves, which is basically their only food source. Antibiotics can disrupt that digestion so badly that the koalas can starve even if cured of chlamydia.
Ah, so the treatment can be as dangerous as the disease?
In some ways, yes. A vaccine avoids that critical issue. This new one, apparently given in a single dose, reduces severe symptoms and cuts mortality by at least 65%.
That sounds really positive. But is everyone celebrating?
Not entirely. There's a counterpoint being raised, particularly by conservation groups like the Australian Koala Foundation. They question the sheer practicality of vaccinating potentially hundreds of thousands of wild koalas spread across vast, often inaccessible areas. Catching and vaccinating each one is a huge logistical challenge.
I can see that. So what's their argument?
They argue that while the vaccine is a useful tool for koalas already in care, the resources might be better spent tackling the root cause of the koala's overall decline, habitat loss.
Yeah, the bigger picture.
Exactly. They, along with other groups like the Queensland Conservation Council, stress that the fundamental threats are the ongoing destruction of eucalyptus forests due to wildfires, drought, and urban expansion. Koalas were vulnerable before chlamydia became so widespread, and they'll remain vulnerable, even if vaccinated, if their homes and food sources disappear.
So it highlights this classic tension in conservation, doesn't it? Direct medical help versus protecting the environment they live in.
Precisely. It's a complex balancing act. Do you focus on treating the symptoms in individual animals, or do you prioritize preserving the ecosystem that sustains the entire population? Ideally, you need both, but resources are always limited.
A tough choice. Okay, let's move to our final section, text and context. First up, a legal development from India's Supreme Court. The court has issued some strict new guidelines about handling DNA evidence in criminal cases. What's this about? So what does this all mean?
This is quite important for the criminal justice system. The Supreme Court stepped in because it found instances of significant unexplained delays and problems with the chain of custody for DNA samples in past cases.
Chain of custody, you mean tracking who handled the sample?
Exactly. If there are gaps or inconsistencies in documenting how a sample was collected, stored, and transported, it raises concerns about potential contamination or tampering. This lack of a uniform, rigorous procedure meant that sometimes crucial DNA evidence was being rejected by courts.
I see. So what are the new guidelines?
They're pretty detailed and aim to tighten things up considerably. At the point of collection, say, at a crime scene or a hospital, there needs to be rigorous documentation. This includes details from the first information report, FIR, and signatures from the medical professional involved, the investigating police officer, and importantly, an independent witness.
An independent witness, okay.
Then the investigating officer is personally responsible for ensuring the sample gets to the Forensic Science Laboratory, the FSL, ideally within 48 hours. And throughout this entire process, from collection to analysis, a strict chain of custody register must be maintained, logging everyone who handles the sample and when. This is designed to prevent any unauthorized access or potential tampering.
How is DNA evidence actually viewed legally? Is it absolute proof?
No, legally it's considered opinion evidence. It's expert testimony based on scientific analysis, but it's not treated as substantive proof on its own, like an eyewitness account might be, though eyewitnesses can be unreliable too.
Interesting distinction.
Its probative value, how much weight it carries in court, depends entirely on the scientific validity and the legal integrity of how it was collected, handled, and analyzed. There have been past Supreme Court rulings where DNA reports were thrown out precisely because of these issues, samples collected from open areas where contamination was likely, or samples stored improperly in police custody for long periods.
So these new guidelines are really about bolstering the reliability and admissibility of DNA evidence in court.
Exactly. They aim to ensure that this powerful scientific tool is used effectively and fairly within the justice system by maintaining its integrity from start to finish. This raises an important question about past cases, but certainly sets a standard going forward.
Makes sense. Okay, next, in text and context, we're looking at a huge environmental challenge, the global plastic pollution crisis. The article frames it as a serious global environmental issue, and it's hard to disagree. It affects ecosystems, potentially human health, and definitely sustainable development. Okay, let's unpack this.
The scale of the problem is, frankly, alarming. Global plastic production essentially doubled just between 2000 and 2019, hitting 460 million tons annually.
Doubled in less than 2 decades. Wow.
And the management of that plastic is, well, not great. Only about 9% of it gets recycled globally. Worse still, an estimated 22% completely evades waste management systems, meaning it ends up littered in landfills, rivers, and ultimately the oceans.
I've heard that projection about more plastic than fish in the ocean.
That's the projection from the UN Environment Program, UNEP. If current trends don't change, they warn we could reach that point by the middle of this century.
Well, that's a terrifying thought.
And it's not just about visible pollution. Plastic production and incineration contribute significantly to greenhouse gas emissions, about 3.4% of the global total. So it's linked to climate change, too.
Is there a coordinated global response happening?
There is momentum building. All 193 UN member states agreed back in 2022 to negotiate a legally binding international treaty to end plastic pollution. Those negotiations are
A
ongoing.
global treaty, okay.
And Unity itself has set a really ambitious target. They believe an 80% reduction in plastic pollution is achievable within the next 2 decades if the right policies are implemented globally.
80% in 2 decades, that's huge.
Yeah.
What kind of policies are needed? What are the key remedies?
It really requires action on multiple fronts. A top priority is limiting the production of virgin plastics, especially single-use items that are used once and thrown away. We just need less plastic overall.
Makes sense. What else?
Investing heavily in better waste collection and recycling infrastructure and technologies is crucial. We need to capture more plastic and be able to actually turn it into useful materials again. And critically, we need to build profitable markets for recycled plastics. Right now, recycled plastic often costs more than new virgin plastic, which discourages its use. It only makes up about 6% of total plastic material production.
So creating demand for the recycled stuff. How?
And economic incentives can help. Things like landfill taxes make dumping plastic more expensive. Extended producer responsibility schemes make manufacturers responsible for the end of life of their products. Deposit refund systems for bottles encourage return.
And what about individuals? What stands out to you?
Individual choices matter immensely. Choosing reusable alternatives, avoiding single-use items, proper disposal, it all adds up. And the media plays a huge role in raising awareness and pushing for systemic change. It's a collective effort.
Definitely a problem requiring action from governments, industry, and all of us. All right, our final piece today, also from Text and Context, takes us into the world of high tech. We're talking about Apple's new A19 Pro chipset. Apple's making some big claims, MacBook Pro level performance in an iPhone. They're positioning this as a potential game changer, specifically for on-device artificial intelligence. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes, the claims are bold, and the underlying technology is quite interesting. The core innovation seems to be these things called neural accelerators. What's different here is that Apple has apparently embedded these accelerators directly into each of the 6 cores of the graphics processing unit, the GPU.
Okay, so AI capability built right into the graphics cores. How does that differ from before?
Traditionally, you might have a separate chip or a dedicated section of the main processor specifically for AI tasks, often called a neural processing unit or NPU. By integrating these accelerators directly with the GPU cores, Apple aims to make the mathematical operations needed for AI, things like matrix multiplication, crucial for deep learning, much faster and more power efficient. These tasks often run in parallel, much like graphics rendering.
Right, parallel processing. So what does this actually mean for someone using the phone? What are the tangible benefits?
Well, potentially quite a few. For gaming, you could see smoother performance, especially with real-time AI-driven effects or enhancements, alongside things like hardware-accelerated ray tracing for more realistic lighting.
Okay, better gaming.
Enhanced computational photography thinks smarter scene recognition, better noise reduction, more sophisticated portrait modes, all processed instantly on the device.
More immersive, augmented reality AR experiences, as the chip can handle complex environment mapping and object recognition more efficiently.
And perhaps the biggest one long-term, the ability to run powerful local large language models directly on the iPhone itself, without constantly needing to send data to the cloud for processing. This means faster responses, better privacy, and functionality even when offline.
Running LLMs locally on a phone. That's a big step. How does this A19 Pro approach compare to what competitors like Google or Qualcomm are doing?
It's an interesting contrast. Google's Tensor chips, like the G5, seem heavily optimized for their own software-driven AI services, leveraging Google's cloud infrastructure. Qualcomm's Snapdragon chips, like the 8 Elite, often push for raw, peak performance, hitting very high benchmark scores, perhaps sometimes at the expense of sustained performance or battery efficiency.
So where does Apple fit? What's fascinating here is
The A19 Pro, based on these descriptions, seems focused on achieving a specific kind of balance. It's not just about peak speed, but about delivering strong, sustained performance, high energy efficiency, minimizing heat output, and optimizing battery life. This hybrid architecture, embedding AI into the GPU, aims for powerful, real-world AI capabilities that you can actually use for extended periods without the phone overheating or the battery draining instantly.
so sustained, efficient on-device power.
Exactly. It's this fusion of AI processing directly with graphics capabilities, likely supported by other advancements mentioned, like better cooling systems, maybe a vapor chamber, and faster connectivity with something like a new N1 wireless chip.
It really feels like they're trying to redefine what a smartphone can fundamentally do, especially in the AI realm. For anyone interested in mobile gaming, photography, or the future of local AI, this A19 Pro seems like one to watch.
Definitely shaping up to be a significant piece of silicon.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.